With the rise of streaming services and premium ways to view content online, I think many of us have become estranged from the idea of a good commercial. They've become so optimized with sucking your brain through the screen and implanting urges within us that it's difficult to appreciate them in any form at all. But you know which commercial I'll always appreciate? The classic fighting game commercials. During the early days when fighting games were rampant in arcades and becoming better for consoles, advertisements for fighting games were becoming an art form of their own. Video game commercials in general at this time were all pretty crazy. Absurd is probably the best word to describe them.
Hey!
Yes?
You look like a real jerk!
Well, I am a corporate executive.
He stops exciting things from happening.
But fighting games had an extra atmosphere of crazy to them. Perhaps it was because fighting games were known to attract the most hardcore gamers that they wanted the commercials to be as hardcore as possible. They pretty much didn't hold back. It got so crazy that Bill Clinton, the President of the United States, had to comment on one of them.
And if you look at some of these ads, it's hard to argue with a straight face that the games were made for adults in the first place. And here's one that the most unbelievable of all, it says, "Kill your friends, guilt-free."
A common theme in the ads, like the one Bill Clinton was reading, was that of challenging the reader. They'd say things like, "Do you have what it takes?" or "Few live to finish this game," and things like that. And it makes sense, considering these games are generally versus games, where the whole point is to challenge your friends or the best players in the arcades. These ads even started targeting other games outright. They really leaned into the idea of it being a fight, even telling players that they should bang the buttons really hard in Street Fighter 1, which seems like such a hardware nightmare. While digging through Capcom's Street Fighter Vault, I found some comment from Takayuki Nakayama in which he says, "Everything from the characters, story, to the special moves are introduced here. The tagline of a powerful and technical human war was pretty cool at the time," in reference to Street Fighter 1. These advertisements helped shape the identity of fighting games, but I'm genuinely curious what the faithful translation of human war is, cause that sounds more hardcore than I think anybody in the West would be ready to handle. At the same time these magazine ads were happening, TV commercials were taking a similar approach, but with access to moving pictures and sound, they came up with much crazier approaches to showing people what these games were about. Virtua Fighter, for example, was all about boasting its 3D graphics and showing off how real these graphics were. The commercials boldly claimed that it was all so real you would feel it. All the early promotions I could find were pretty shocking and even grotesque, which was an interesting premise to try to sell a fighting game on. As time progressed and 3D graphics became a bit less impressive, the ads still focused on the games being realistic, but also we get to that more absurd era, where the lines between reality and game are blurred for the purpose of comedy, shock, or anything in the middle.
Honey? What the heck happened to your face?
Fighting never felt so real. Take every punch and execute every combo with the next generation of graphics and speed. Virtua Fighter 5, the new look of real fighting.
The absurdist commercials weren't unique to just fighting games, it was all of video games in general. Watching them now, it's actually not surprising to me why parents would think gaming could make their kids violent. These ads are legitimately concerning. I guess that's just how it was back then. It was cool to be violent and edgy and rebellious. Part of this absurdist atmosphere definitely comes from the fact that many of these games came from Japan, like Street Fighter, Virtua Fighter, Tekken, and so on. Japan's been known around the world to have absurd commercials, but I think it's cool to see those choices so prominent in American versions of the commercials as well. But then we've gotta talk Mortal Kombat. These games were developed and produced in America, so it would make sense that these commercials were different. In fact, even to this day, I'd say they grab my attention more than most of the others. The first Mortal Kombat commercial I could find was the iconic piece that pictures people of all ages and colors running through the streets. I don't really understand what the message of this commercial is after watching it countless times, but it's extremely gripping. No words are spoken other than the title of the game, which is backed by the techno groove of the theme song swelling up behind it. People are clambering through the streets like a unified body and staring directly at the camera as if they're all of one mind. They then lift a boy into the air and turn the cameras away, suggesting that they're all in on something that you're not. In fact, they don't even want you there. It's just such a cool way to advertise a product while seemingly not even being about said product. But after this, Mortal Kombat commercials take a turn. Because MK games first used human models in their games, it made sense for the commercials to lean into that, so a lot of the early ones were live action through and through. But since Mortal Kombat was all about being mature and gritty and dark, that tone took over in the commercials as well. So many of them, I can't actually believe even made it to television. Apart from the absurdist approach, Mortal Kombat went for straight horror. Quick shots of eyes, monsters sprouting out of humans, dark shots, foreboding music, it's all there. Really crazy stuff. But at the end of the day, I find things like this really valuable. What we see here is a clear identity in the marketing, which is just a ploy to sell more games, but it also is what leads to people having such brand loyalty and connections with the games. Most of the OG commercials came out before I was born, so I can't say I remember them or what they were like to see on TV, but they're pieces of history that I've been made aware of later. The classic Mortal Kombat shout is still maybe the most iconic part of that franchise 3 decades after the fact. And that moves us into the era of fighting game commercials that I do actually remember, those from the 2000s. At this point, all the major fighting games had made names for themselves and could cut to the chase more in their commercials while being witty about jokes from the games.
Fight!
Sorry?
You, fight! Finish him!
They've also pretty much moved on from arcade promotions in the West, focusing on console releases like that of the PS2. The interesting thing about this time is that you'll find way fewer TV spots and commercials proper for games released during this time, at least for games from the East. For example, I couldn't find a single Street Fighter 3 commercial that was featuring any kind of live action or special animation. They're all kind of just footage of combos with light graphics and some music. These were aired before the 2000s, obviously, ranging from 97 to 99, but they were targeting owners or buyers of Dreamcasts and PlayStations more than arcade goers. And I think that's what really started happening. The transition from traditional TV spots to in-person marketing at stores that would sell games and the internet seemed to be the way to go.
I want to trade her in. Just released. I'll take her.
There's not many commercials to speak on from the early 2000s because of this shift. Promoting games on TV was no longer enough for hardcore gamers. You needed to show off trailers at conventions and expos and showcases to get people's attention in gaming after the early 2000s. This shift is evident in the lack of traditional promotion for fighting games after 2004 or 2005. In my research, I started to find more trailers and teasers for these things that will be shown at events like E3 or Tokyo Game Show, which actually started within a year of each other in the late mid-90s. And this is where we started to lose what made these promotions so special. Companies would show off trailers for their games at these events, which meant gameplay and in-game footage were the important focal points. This also gave fans something to look forward to. People now had a showcase dedicated to their favorite games and knew that if a certain company was working on something, they'd probably get to see something from that event. It seems to me that structuring game promotion like this made it less important to appeal to gamers overall when they knew they could promote to dedicated fans directly. As time went on and games started to move towards software as a service, this became more and more apparent as most of the promotions I see for games nowadays, I know when they're coming and I know where they're coming from way ahead of time. Fighting games specifically will promote new DLC after major tournaments, big gaming shows like PlayStation State of Play, and sometimes they just hold their own showcases like we got for Street Fighter 6, which was hosted by Lil Wayne for some reason. That's a form of commercial in and of itself that demonstrates how far away we've moved from the traditional TV spot. So yeah, now it's easier to find up-to-date information on our favorite games, but I still think we've lost touch with a quality that used to make something about them feel so special. Lots of these games have legacy, but those legacies had to be built around player culture. So many of the commercials for these games nowadays just feel so bland and boring compared to what we used to have. For better or for worse, I guess. But I don't want to leave this video off on a note like that, so I've collected 3 commercials from recent memory that all seem to encompass a bit of each point that I mentioned earlier. So here's the Street Fighter 6 launch commercial, which features Lil Wayne, the face of this game's marketing for some reason. He gives a pretty uninspired line reading of generic things to say about a AAA title, but it's at least a transformative commercial. There's clips of people playing the game and even turning into their avatars, which enhances that sense of community that comes with a multiplayer game like this. I wouldn't say I particularly like this one, but I am glad it exists. As one of the few TV spots to actually come out in recent times for a fighting game, this definitely makes sense for a product aimed at millions of potential buyers, especially in the West.
今日は一人でバトル。あ、ギルティギア。
Now here's a TV spot I think everyone can get behind. I've no clue how something like this reads in Japan where it aired, but here in the States, this was probably the most memorable commercial I've seen for a modern fighting game. It's simple and to the point. The theme song plays in the background, the actors look excited, and they even show actual members of the community, all within 30 seconds. It also feels like it has meme potential, which was definitely touched upon when it dropped. But there's one commercial that I want to talk about probably more than the others. I've saved the worst for last, and it's pretty much the whole reason I even wanted to make this video.
Good one! Hey, come on, come on!
So this commercial makes absolutely no sense in almost any possible way, and yet it got the green light for airing. The commercial features iconic ladies of the KOF series as well as Terry Bogard, who's probably the most recognizable character from the franchise. His actions in the commercial are completely out of character, and all the sounds used just feel out of place. Not only that, but the gameplay shown at the end, I'm pretty sure that's not actually King of Fighters All-Stars gameplay. I played the game for a few weeks, so I think I would know. There isn't much to say about this commercial, but if you've seen the ads for mobile games lately, you'd know there's almost no standards at all for them, and for fighting games, it seems there's just no need for them anymore. In conclusion, I don't even have cable anymore, so I've no means of watching commercials really aside from what shows up on internet ads. I don't like advertisements being shown to me in general, but that's because they don't feel like there's much care behind them anymore. It's just to push a product most of the time. There's less interest in being creative, and it's just about showing off graphics, combos, or new mechanics. I just think it's unfortunate that we lost something so fun along the way, and thought it would be an interesting trip down memory lane. I hope you all enjoyed. See you in the next one.